Welcome to Wordpath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are teaching and preserving them. My guest tonight is Dr. Jerry Bread. Thanks for coming, Jerry. I'm really pleased to have you on the show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm honored to be with y'all this evening.
Now, I know you have a very long and impressive list of credentials. I'm going to just mention a few things so people will have a better idea of your perspective and where you're coming from. Jerry is a professor of Native American Studies at OU. He has a BS in Education degree from Northeastern State University and also education degrees, master's and PhD from OU, specializing in educational administration with an emphasis on American Indian education, leadership, and policy studies. He's also a member of our Intertribal Wordpath Society Board of Advisors. For 10 years, he's been director of the Foundations in Native Education Leadership Program and the American Indian Teacher Corps in the College of Education at OU. He's on many boards nationally, including the Southwest Indian Polytechnic Institute in Albuquerque. He heads a study group on the feasibility of establishing a tribal community college in Oklahoma. And he's educational liaison for the United Indian Nations of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. So that'll give people some of the idea of the rich experience and background and expertise that you have. Now let's get a little bit more personal. I know you're a member of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, and you told me that you have a, quote, special attachment to the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. Could you explain that a little bit?
Sure, I'm wearing it right now, Al. It's just a special attachment. I'm really pleased to be with y'all this evening. I believe a lot in what you represent here as far as American Indian languages are concerned, and I'm a very strong proponent of that in terms of education today and tomorrow for our children. And that lends itself back to my background as a person growing up in the southwest part of the state, down around the Wichita Mountains out there, just about 13 miles south of Carnegie, Oklahoma, around Saddle Mountain. That's where I'm from originally, and I guess I usually tell people my heart and my spirit really is Kiowa, because that's where I was born and raised, and my educational background and experience in the modern times is Cherokee, because I went to school down in Tahlequah and got to know the Cherokee people very, very well. My father's a full-blood Cherokee man, and I'm very proud of that. And when he went down to Fort Sill from Sequoia Indian School, he met a Kiowa lady, married her, and that's how we come about with these Kiowa Cherokees you're talking about right now. But I'm very proud of my background, and I'm very honored to say that language has been an intricate part of it. Unfortunately, I don't speak it as fluently as we used to probably 30, 40 years ago because of the environment we live in nowadays. We're not there enough to speak it in Norman, Oklahoma, but we still have people.
You actually grew up exposed to two Oklahoma Indian languages, didn't you, because of your heritage?
Most certainly did, and I didn't really realize there were Cherokees in this country until I was about 10 years old. I thought everybody back until I was 10 was named, Eagle Heart or Hunting Horse or Stumbling Bear or White Buffalo. And when I grew up and my dad took us to eastern Oklahoma to show us what he called God's country, I met the Cherokee people and fell in love with them at that time. I didn't realize my father spoke fluent Cherokee until I was about 10 years old, and we went back out there and he started acting sort of strange or speaking this strange language, which I knew wasn't Kiowa, and I asked him what he was saying. He said he's talking Cherokee. So Dad was a fluent speaker, and even though he was among Kiowas, he still retained his language, which was surprising, if you're being married to Mom as long as he was. So yeah, I'm very proud to be a part of Cherokee heritage too.
So now we know the kind of stuff you come from. It's a pretty powerful background.
Yes, I'd like to think so.
And you married, as I understand, Sally Ann Bell, who's Choctaw and teaches here in Norman.
Yes, Sally's from Philadelphia, Mississippi originally. She's Mississippi Choctaw. And when I first met my wife, she was very, very fluent in Choctaw. And she still is to a certain extent, but if you sit her down and ask her about her degree of fluency, she'll say it's probably diminished somewhat from, let's say 10 is very fluent, she's probably around 6 or 7 now, whereas 10, 15 years ago she was 9 or 10. So being away from the language has really caused her to where she's lost some of that fluency as far as Choctaw, but she's a native speaker herself. She can speak Choctaw fluently. So you don't, you're not, when you talk about Indian languages, it's not some abstraction out there. This is something you really know in your own heart and your own experience and your family. Definitely. My family is very well versed in it. Mom was a fluent speaker. I always said I used to dream in Kiowa and think in Kiowa, and smelling Kiowa and acting Kiowa, but as I got formally educated, I'll give it the positive note. No, we not assimilated, but formally educated.
Right.
We kind of lost those things there. But once in a while, I still have the Kiowa thought in terms of language in my head, and once in a while, I'll say something aloud without really preparing to say it. Just comes out, but not as much as 20 years ago, being here in the Norman area.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know some of your personal background. Now I want to kind of get back to some major topics we can hit on some tonight, drawing more on your expertise as a professional and educator, someone in Native American studies, and with a perspective not just of your family, which is very rich in and of itself, but of the state and the nation.
Right.
You made a statement to me the other day that I thought was very striking and that I wanted to bring out on the show. You said probably 98% of Oklahoma Indians do not speak their traditional language.
Yeah.
And I, from everything I know, I totally agree with you. That's probably true.
I might put even more of a qualifier on that. I'm a baby boom generation person, and I think that to qualify that statement even more so, and it's probably even a little more concerned when I talk about it, people that are 30 and under, 30 and under probably, I would go so far as to say that's a very accurate statistic as far as speaking their native tongue. People say, how do you know, Dr. Britt, how do you know that? Where do you get your statistics at that? I said, I get it from what I told you a minute ago, LE 103, that's life experience. Being at the powwows, being at the schools, at the churches, community meetings, going to these places, from Hominy all the way down to Atoka and out to Carnegie area and up to Tahlequah and in between, and listening to the people and not hearing the young people speak their native tongues. So I think it's a pretty accurate statistics, one that we should be concerned about as Indian people.
I believe in it. I've usually looked at it from the other side from my work in Intertribal Wordpath Society, because we try to keep track roughly of how many people still do speak their languages. And if you compare that list, which is pretty small numbers, to the number of Indian people in Oklahoma, I totally buy your estimate of 98%. I really do. But, well, I need to ask you some more about this, though, because we know that if you talk to people about the value or the importance of Indian language, almost everybody, well, maybe I shouldn't say almost everybody, but an awful lot of people will say, yes, it's important. Yes, we need to save our language. So if there's a great belief in Indian languages, why are they used so little? Why do so few people speak it? And what are the implications of that?
Well, I think there are various factors that you have to examine and discuss out fully in order to arrive at some conclusion to the questions. So I don't have the answer, but I do have some responses, I think, to such a question.
Thoughts.
Well, a lot of times, if you talk to the parents about the value of Indian dialect or language, a lot of times, they will tell you that we think it's very important, but we don't speak it in the home because I don't know how to speak it. My mother or my grandpa or my grandparents didn't teach me that, and you say, why? I think you find a pretty generic response is that they thought it was not in the best interest of their children to teach them the native tongue first, since English was the language that they would use the most in their lives in the school setting, in the public. And back in the early times, it probably wasn't too acceptable to speak a broken English or an Indian language in the public school setting. A lot of our kids went to public schools, are still going to public schools, and a lot of the parents felt like it might deter or might be damaging to the kids' esteem and everything, rather than teaching them fluent English. So that's a generic response you get. On the other hand, you'll find some of our tribal people in Oklahoma who are very, very supportive and very serious about teaching their children the tribal languages. I like to think of all people, the Cherokee people in eastern Oklahoma, up around the small communities like Bell Community, Nycut, Delonaghy, Stillwell, even to a certain extent Tahlequah. A lot of the Cherokee kids still can speak their language, but not as fluent as the generation before them. Same thing possibly in Choctaw country. I know in my wife's situation at one time, as recent as 20 years ago, I would say almost 90% of all their tribal members spoke Choctaw fluently. And at this time, as we speak, it's probably around 70%. So they're keeping their language alive pretty much for the sake of their identity as Indian people. So I think there's all types of responses you would get. In terms of why not, well, I used to get a little more critical about that when it comes to the concept of citizenship and the relevancy of that to government and vice versa. The state of Oklahoma, for example, provides a benefit to its citizen called public schools. And in those public schools, the state of Oklahoma tries to perpetuate what is Oklahoma: society, values, customs, to make you a good Oklahoma citizen. Now, I go and ask the tribal governments the same questions. Why can't you do that for your tribal citizenry? You know, provide that same type of benefits in terms of tribal culture, language, values, etc. But as it is, you'll find very, very few tribes making a full-fledged effort to maintain the culture and the language and the values. They, for some, well, I wouldn't say strange reasons, they seem to me have become very dependent on the public schools for all schooling of their children, including the culture to a certain extent. So I get into a little preachy mood whenever I talk about it, and a mode of saying tribal governments need to do more for their people in terms of the identity of the tribe and the culture of the tribe, etc.
Now, I don't want to, name any particular tribes and say, oh, they're not doing enough. We don't want to get into that kind of discussion, but I think there's a lot of commonality around the state where you see a similar story again and again, so we can kind of speak generically. Anyway, but as I've talked to people in different tribes, about what their government is or isn't doing, it seems like someone always has an answer as to, why more cannot be done. I hear, well, there isn't money. Well, we're competing with the burial fund and the housing department and this and that. Or, well, our language has too many dialects. How do we know which one to teach? Or, well, there aren't very many speakers left and they don't really want to teach. Or, you could just go on and on and on listing all the reasons. And sometimes when I'm feeling a little more discouraged about these issues, I feel like, people are better at finding reasons not to do this than they are at even making any attempt to do it sometime.
That's right. I think a lot of times the issue of dependency comes up and independency with the tribal governments. And I tell myself a lot of times we need good leadership in that area. We need people who have a lot of vision, foresight. Hindsight's great, and I'm not a person to criticize that. To have the traditions is great, but I usually tell the tribal people, friends, if you want to maintain that, if you want to keep those things called values in the culture and the Indian way, you better teach your children how to speak the language, because that's the basis to being an Indian person, in my opinion, in terms of their identity as an Indian person, and that is language. Because once you lose that language and become an English-speaking only person, then you have lost what I consider your culture as an Indian or a tribal person, not an Indian person. So I kind of get up to a point to where I encourage the tribes to use some type of creativity and address the question is, how can we best perpetuate our tribal government? And I see no better means than education, and that's teaching them the language formally, not informally, not with some small programs. That's admirable, that's the beginning. But I think tribes a lot of times as a government need to start looking at the picture, the vision that they have, and create one and build something that's formal in the form of teaching them their culture and language. And I see no better way than a tribe building one of their own tribal elementary schools. I think that's a good approach to perpetuating their tribal government and giving parents an option. You can go to public schools, or you can come to the tribal school and learn not only the public school curriculum, but you also can learn a cultural curriculum which includes teaching the language and values of our tribal people by the elderly and by the trained people.
I think that's a powerful idea, and you mentioned two other things that I really kind of glommed onto, the words vision and leadership. I think it takes that. And again, I don't want to be critical of anyone who is in a position of leadership in the formal sense, tribal government. But sometimes, I actually think language teaching itself takes a very special kind of leadership. I was in a language group the other day where there were a number of elders around who speak the language, but it's a tribe that has very few speakers left, and almost everyone is kind of shy to use it at all. And we were trying to set up some plans for language classes, and we were asking them to teach us things, and it was kind of a little hard to get the people to even speak up. It's hard, and some of it has to do with modesty and cultural standards, I understand, and not wanting to kind of single yourself out as a leader. But unfortunately, when you're at that kind of crisis stage with something like language and cultural loss, it does take a real kind of almost heavy-handed leadership sometimes to make that effort to say, yes, this is what we need to learn. here's my lesson, learn it from me, you know. Don't just wait and say we're going to do this someday. We need to do this now. Let's start now. It takes someone to have that kind of boldness, even if it borders on being inappropriate. I think sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah, I understand. I usually like to use the visual approach in trying to demonstrate the need that's there. And when I use the visual approach, I'll put up on the board, or I'll bring some pictures or some papers with me and let them see the statistics and let them realize that Quapaw language is possibly an extinct language today.
Right.
Or that Pawnee language is close on the cutting edge of a dead language because there's one or two people living that can speak that language. I let them see that rather than hear it.
Right.
And when they see it, they sit back and think about it and say, are we really in that bad shape with our language? And the answer is yes, with all due respect.
Right.
Yes, and our goal, and I sense it with yourself with Wordpath, our goal isn't to criticize or attack. Our goal is to give them some ideas and assistance on how they can go about rectifying that condition, meeting it head on, and trying to prepare for the next millennium of maintenance of their tribal life and culture.
Right.
And that's what I see a lot about organizations like the one you're talking about now that you're part of with Wordpath, and an intricate part of that development is partnerships. And that's what I was talking to you about a minute ago. Partnerships are so critical today. We need to gather all the strength and spirit that we can to maintain, and the more the merrier. So a partnership with a tribe that has a language that they want to preserve, a partnership with an independent organization with people such as yourself, the consultants and technical assistance persons, and then partnership with a university or an educational institute, i.e. research and teaching.
Right.
I don't think you can ask for any more powerful combination of maintaining or retaining language than those three entities working together for the community, the Indian community. That's what I encourage the tribes to do, is to let us work with them, in that area.
Well, now you've touched on something by bringing in the university there, which I agree should have a really important role to play in this, in Oklahoma of all places.
Oh, yes.
But the point I want to ask you about, connected to that, is, well, I have kind of two sides of the question. It all has to do with a lack of partnership between communities and the universities, not only OU, but the universities and colleges in the state to one degree or another. There's sort of two sides to it. One side is sometimes I go to offer my services to someone if they don't know who I am. Actually, I have no affiliation with OU anymore, although I once did. But as soon as I say I'm in Norman, they think, oh, they kind of put me in a certain bag. Oh, you're this university person. You have this kind of agenda. I know what you people are like. We don't trust you. So there's a tremendous distrust if someone doesn't know me. If they have any, as soon as they make any connection with the university, they kind of go, uh-oh. And on the other hand, I've been in a number of communities where I've said, it's too bad there is this distrust when an outside professional comes in and tries to help, and there's a lack of trust, so it limits how helpful they can be, or it makes it kind of slower to get off the ground. You know what I think you all should do? You should send some of your people to university, get them to be trained linguists, then they can come back and help you. And I can't tell you how many people have told me, oh, that won't work. We send our people off to university, they come back and people think, oh, you're not Indian anymore. You've been to the university, you're all assimilated, and then they don't trust them anymore. How do we get past this and get those two entities working together better?
There's a concept I teach a lot about in this introduction to what we call tribal economic development. And language, believe it or not, is a very important part of economic development, in my opinion. And that concept is called de facto sovereignty. And what that literally means is the tribal people making decisions that the tribe has, and identifying those needs and working on those needs rather than some outside group coming in and doing it for them. One of the things that I notice about myself is maybe a little different than other people like yourself possibly, is when I go out to the Indian communities, they come up to me and ask me about what we can do to help them out as far as the university is concerned. They'll tell me, we need some help here, we need some help there. And that's one of the reasons we have this outreach concept in Native American studies. And that's one of the reasons I play that role, because I'm one of those transitional people in the sense of being capable of being a cultural person if I choose to, and at the same time capable of being the university image if I choose to, and at times both of them. So a lot of times I think that's important, that the university identify those people and get them out there and let them do the talking about what the role and image of the university may be for tribes like that, and get the people's trust And I like to think I'm one of the few people that do have the trust of Indian people in the state. And when I go out and visit with them about what we can do with Native American Studies or OU or whatever, 99% of the time we back it up with what we say.
Yeah.
So I don't run into much of that with the Indian community. It's possible a non-Indian person would run into more of that than I would, really.
In all honesty, yes. But also, I think you've earned your reputation.
Sure.
I mean, I've heard of you around the state, and people know you, and they know that you can be trusted.
Yeah, I work hard for it, and I like to carry that image with me with the University of Oklahoma because I think they have so much to offer to Indian people. But more importantly, Alice, I think Indian people have a lot more to offer to the university than they realize. And that's one of the things I'm trying to prove and show to people that, yeah, we have a lot to offer. We have some ways about us as Indian people in education, in business, in language that are very, very appropriate for an academic setting.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's something that I'd like to get out and show more up to the university people. They're very, very successful people in this area of communication, for example. We were talking about that a minute ago.
Right.
As far as how we can communicate. So
Right.
outreach is very important, and in Native American Studies, we try very hard to accommodate our Indian people.
I think that's great. I think that'll be the greatest power of the department to the extent that it can do that. That's wonderful. And of course, we should probably mention for those who may not know that both Northeastern State and OU have kind of led the way in offering native language courses. And yet I think you're talking, maybe you can give us an idea of some of the other ideas you have. What else can the university do? Because any state university in any state generally will say that its mission is research and teaching and community service. So how can the universities in this state serve the communities better, especially where language is concerned?
Well, I tell you what, we're in the heartland of Indian country, and as all your viewers know probably, or most of them who are familiar with it know, we have the largest population of American Indians in the state. It's the largest ethnic group, if you want to refer to them as such, in the state of Oklahoma. We have so many areas of potential for development academically and service-wise at this state. For example, I don't see any problem other than timing and funding, and they're probably big problems, but I think we can overcome them. And establishing ourselves as one of the leading Native American linguistic centers in the United States here at this university. I say the same thing about education. Same thing about business with tribal management and gaming like it is right now. I say the same thing even to a certain point in journalism, in areas of health, in technology. But I think one of the best ways we can do that is form partnerships and develop conferences, colloquia, symposium, different type of academic and practice settings combined here on this campus, or take them out to the community. I think we're doing that a lot to some extent with the American Indian Institute on campus. It's not in language, but in principle we have them going. So I think a big Native American language conference would really be set well in the country. And I think a lot of people, Indian and non-Indian, would be very, very interested in attending it. And I think it would be an honor and a privilege to develop and host such a thing here on this campus, right in the heart of Indian country. That's just one example, you know.
Excellent idea, yeah.
Not to mention the media and the training things that you could develop, the tools in terms of teaching tools and language, methodologies, even the program, an academic program, more so than just the 9 hours of languages that we teach. We need to get a little bit more into that, whatever it is, in terms of linguistics. But I think we can have a very solid Native American linguistic program here. Instead of just sitting them here and letting them take a few hours of language and then taking the non-Indian component, I think we can specialize even greater, more so in languages, Native American languages, academically here at OU.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a good base there, but it certainly could go even farther than it has. You know, one of the excuse me, one of the things that's pleased me, and I'll bet it has you too, is that some of the people who have taken those language courses have gone on to become leaders in their own communities in language work.
I'm very proud of that too, and they say they're from the University of Oklahoma and they've taken these classes. I met several of them with the Choctaws, some of the Creeks, even some of the other Indian people who are non-Choctaw who are have taken these classes. And I'm very proud. I think we need to get more publicity on that, really, as far as I'm concerned, for the image of OU. That because of those language classes, I think it's really has fueled this fire as leadership in this area within the tribes. But I still would like to see us do more programmatic things with tribes and helping them preserve, maintain, retain, obtain their languages now, because I think it's critical at this time. And if we don't do it, one of our other sister universities or institutions of higher ed don't do it, I think we're in for a hard time with languages.
It would really be a terrible missed opportunity, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah,
I
such
think
a
so.
loss to the state, because Oklahoma wouldn't be Oklahoma without Indian languages.
That's right.
Even though the numbers are dwindling, it's an essential part of what it is to be an Oklahoman. I think that those cultures and those languages are here, and we're not all one culture.
Yeah, I hope
we don't all speak only English.
That's right. I mean, I
it's
hope
one of the most distinctive things about the state.
I hope we rehearsed this well enough to get that point across to
I hope so,
everybody
too.
this evening, really.
Shall we say it again and
Sure.
again and again?
I think we've been saying it for a long time. It's,
Yeah.
in the areas of education, we've been saying this for a long time. I say give us a chance to show you what potential there is in Indian affairs at the end of the state at a university setting. And NAS is a good beginning. I encourage people to look into our program, the Native American Studies program. It's a wonderful program. Opportunity to get involved with not just the employment, study and research, but also into the professional field at the master's level, and even to an interdisciplinary doctoral program with an emphasis on Native American Studies. So I encourage all people interested in the community and the state to call us up and visit with us and take a class or two and try us out.
Absolutely. And we're down into our last half minute or so now, but let me just ask you briefly, because you had mentioned this point to me before and we didn't bring it up yet, is that what do you think is the role of Indian parents in all of that? Or if there are parents out there watching this program who maybe are not students or don't have any connection with OU, they may or may not live in Norman because this program is beginning to make its way around the state now. But they're raising kids, and they would like for their kids to be part of this process. Are there a couple of suggestions you could give them?
I most certainly have. One of the first suggestions I would have for parents is to consult with their tribal governments respectively and see if there are programs outside of the service area, because most of our Indian people that live in Norman are not living in their service areas where tribal language programs are presented. That's one of the things I would ask. And if not, then I would ask you to consult people like you and encourage the development of community-based language programs in Norman and Oklahoma City and area others with external funding from private or federal sources or even the university. So those are two good suggestions on our part. And also the last suggestion is find someone in your community, even if he or she doesn't speak it that well, find someone in your community, take the initiative to organize somewhat and get them together.
Absolutely. Bless you. Right on. I agree with everything you said. Well, we're just out of time. I want to thank you, Jerry, again for being on this show. I wish we had about 4 hours. Maybe we'll have to have you on again later.
Do me again. I'll be happy to be here with y'all.
Thanks so much.
You're
Join
welcome.
us next time on Wordpath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene.